Have you ever wondered why so many of us feel trapped even when no walls surround us? You wake up each day, go to work, follow routines, pay bills, and tell yourself this is just life. But beneath that surface, a quiet question often lingers: is this really all there is? The strange truth is that most people don't live in an external prison. They live in an internal one. A prison built not of steel bars, but of beliefs, fears, and silent agreements that nobody remembers signing. And the most paradoxical part? We defend this prison. We maintain its walls. When someone tries to step out, we're often the first to warn them. Be careful, that's dangerous. Don't rock the boat. Don't be foolish. Why do we do this? Why would intelligent, conscious beings willingly enforce the very system that keeps them small? The answer lies in a forgotten truth. We were always free. But from the moment we were born, layers of conditioning began to cloud that freedom. Schools, families, religions, media, traditions, all shaping how we see ourselves and what we believe is possible. These systems didn't just give us knowledge, they gave us limitations disguised as wisdom. The inherited fear. Think about the last time you made a decision out of fear. Maybe you didn't speak up at work because you were afraid of being judged. Maybe you stayed in a relationship because you feared being alone. Maybe you chose a career because your parents said it was safe, not because it lit your soul on fire. Now, ask yourself, were those fears natural? Or were they taught? A child is not born afraid to be authentic. Watch a toddler. They laugh too loud, they dance without music, they ask uncomfortable questions. They don't censor themselves. That censorship is learned, and once learned, it becomes second nature. We call it politeness, responsibility, prudence. But peel away the polite labels and you'll see the same root: fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of loss, fear of being different. This is how the invisible prison is maintained, not by guards with whips, but by subtle conditioning that convinces you obedience is safety and conformity is virtue. The social mirror. Look around your life. Every friend, colleague, and neighbor reflects back the same silent rule: stay in line. When a child questions authority, we tell them to obey. When a friend leaves a stable job to chase their passion, we call them reckless. When someone refuses the script, go to school, get a job, buy a house, retire, we treat them like a threat. Without realizing it, we become guards of our own prison. We police each other because the thought of true freedom terrifies us. Freedom means responsibility. Freedom means stepping into the unknown. And the unknown is scarier than a cage we've learned to decorate. This isn't just personal psychology, it's collective hypnosis. The great illusion of modern life is that we are free, when in reality, most people are trapped in a system so subtle they can't even see the bars. The old game of control. History shows us that direct force, armies, chains, threats, can only go so far. Conquerors eventually faced rebellion, and maintaining control by sheer violence required endless resources. Over centuries, those in power discovered a more elegant strategy: control the mind, not the body. Instead of enslaving by force, convince people to enslave themselves. Instead of ruling through terror, rule through belief. Instead of imposing chains, implant fears. This shift was genius in its simplicity. Once people internalize the voice of authority, they no longer need external chains. They police themselves, and even worse, they police each other. And so the system perpetuates itself, generation after generation, without a single soldier needing to lift a sword. Why you feel empty. If you've ever felt a quiet emptiness, even while doing everything right, this is why. Your deeper nature is infinite, expansive, uncontainable. When that infinite self is compressed into a small routine life, the result is suffering. Depression, anxiety, existential dread. These are not random defects in human psychology. They are symptoms of living a false life. They are the soul's way of saying, "This is not who I am. This is not what I came here for." The epidemic of mental health struggles in modern society isn't proof that humans are broken. It's proof that humans are trying to adapt to a system that contradicts their nature. The cage doesn't fit the bird, yet the bird keeps pretending it does. You already are what you seek. Here lies the paradox. People spend decades searching for freedom, enlightenment, or awakening. They chase gurus, books, retreats, philosophies. But the truth is shockingly simple. You are not trying to become enlightened. You already are. Enlightenment is not a prize at the end of a spiritual marathon. It's your starting point, your birthright. What clouds it is programming, layers of fear, belief, and conformity that convince you you're small. Think of the sky on a cloudy day. The sun isn't gone, it's just hidden. Your infinite consciousness is the sun. The programming is the clouds. The work isn't to create the sun, it's to clear the clouds. The first step, questioning. So, how do we begin? How do we stop guarding the very prison that keeps us bound? The first step is the simplest and hardest, questioning. Not in the superficial sense of doubting this or that, but in the radical sense of asking, why do I believe what I believe? Why do I believe I must work a job I dislike? Why do I believe my worth depends on money or status? Why do I believe obeying authority is safer than listening to myself? Each of these questions acts like a crack in the prison wall. With enough cracks, the whole structure begins to collapse. Practical practice for today. Start with small acts of questioning in daily life. When you catch yourself obeying a rule automatically, pause and ask, who does this obedience serve? When you feel fear stopping you from speaking your truth, pause and ask, what am I really afraid of? Whose voice taught me this fear? When you judge someone for living differently, pause and ask, am I protecting them or protecting my own prison walls? These small acts seem insignificant, but they are revolutionary. Each one withdraws energy from the system of control and returns it to you. A gentle warning. The path of authenticity isn't easy. When you begin to step outside the lines, expect resistance. Family may question you. Friends may pull away. Society may shame you. But remember, this is the system defending itself, not truth speaking. The strongest evidence that you are waking up is the intensity of the pushback. If your choices were irrelevant, nobody would care. But they care because deep down, your authenticity threatens the programming that keeps everyone asleep. You were never meant to be a guard of your own prison. You were meant to be free. And freedom doesn't require you to fight or destroy. It requires you to remember. Remember who you are. Remember the key you've always had. So, I leave you with this question. If the prison has always been in your mind, what would your life look like if you stopped guarding it today? Fear disguised as virtue. If you truly pay attention, you'll notice something fascinating. Fear rarely calls itself fear. It wears masks. It dresses up as duty, politeness, common sense, or respect. It hides behind words that sound noble, but the core is always the same: avoidance of authenticity. Think of the times you stayed silent because you didn't want to disrespect someone older, or when you agreed to something you didn't believe in because it seemed responsible, or when you stopped yourself from expressing love because you didn't want to appear foolish. Strip away the polite masks, and what remains is fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of stepping outside the script. The system thrives on these disguised fears. Because as long as you confuse fear with virtue, you'll never resist it. You'll believe you're doing the right thing while you're really just tightening the chains around your own soul. How programming operates. Programming doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk into your life and say, "I'm here to make you small." It operates silently, like background noise you forget to question. From the moment you enter school, the lessons are clear. Wait your turn, don't interrupt, memorize and repeat, don't ask too many questions. These may seem harmless, but they train you to associate obedience with survival. Television and media continue the training. They don't just inform, they frame what's normal. They tell you what's desirable, what's respectable, what's laughable. They set the limits of acceptable thought. Family adds its own layer. Parents, often unconsciously, pass on their own fears. Don't take risks. Be practical. Think of what people will say. Each phrase becomes a brick in the mental prison. And because this conditioning comes from people you love and trust, you rarely see it for what it is. You absorb it as truth. The trap of respectability. Respectability is one of the system's sharpest tools. It convinces you that obedience isn't submission, it's maturity. That conformity isn't fear, it's stability. That silence isn't repression, it's wisdom. But ask yourself, respectability according to whom? Stability by what definition? Wisdom measured against what scale? So often, be respectable really means don't disturb the system. Keep your head down, follow the script, make safe choices, live the life everyone else expects. But here's the contradiction. The people you admire most in history, the mystics, the scientists, the reformers, the artists, were never respectable in their time. They were ridiculed, condemned, or ignored until later generations recognized their courage. Respectability is celebrated by society, but progress is always driven by those who risked being called irresponsible. The emotional cost of conformity. When you force yourself to live within the limits of programming, your inner self doesn't vanish. It pushes back. It expresses itself through anxiety, depression, or a gnawing sense of emptiness. This is why so many people live lives that look fine on the outside, but feel unbearable on the inside. They have jobs, houses, families, and yet they wake up every morning with a quiet dread, because deep down they know, I betrayed myself. I chose safety over truth. This isn't weakness. It's the natural result of trying to compress infinity into a box. Your consciousness wasn't designed for cages. When it's forced into one, suffering is inevitable. Fear masquerading as love. One of the most subtle disguises of fear is love. How many times have you heard parents say, "I just want what's best for you," while pressuring a child into a path that kills their spirit? On the surface, this looks like care, but underneath, it's fear. Fear that the child will fail, fear of social judgment, fear of the unknown. The parent isn't protecting the child's freedom, they're protecting their own conditioning. True love doesn't impose, it trusts, it allows, it believes in the infinite potential of the other. Anything less is attachment laced with fear. The mirror of society. Why is it so hard to break free? Because you're not just facing your own conditioning, you're facing the collective's. When you step out of line, you're not only challenging your personal fears, you're challenging the entire network of agreements that society rests upon, and society defends itself fiercely. If you question too much, you're labeled rebellious. If you refuse conformity, you're called irresponsible. If you live authentically, you're judged selfish. But here's the irony. The same people who criticize you are often the ones secretly admiring your courage. They envy your authenticity because it reflects the freedom they buried long ago. But instead of admitting that, they try to pull you back into the prison. It feels safer to mock the free than to face their own chains. The physics of frequency. Hermetic philosophy speaks of vibration. Everything vibrates. Everything carries a frequency. Fear vibrates low. Conformity vibrates low. Authenticity vibrates high. Courage vibrates high. When you live in fear, you align yourself with the frequency of control. You literally tune into a reality where cages feel real. But when you act with authenticity, you shift frequency. You begin to inhabit a reality where freedom is the natural state. This isn't just metaphor. Even modern research in neuroscience shows how emotional states shape perception. A fearful brain literally processes the world differently than a calm one. It sees more threats, fewer opportunities, less beauty. Change your inner state, and the outer world to break the spell. How do you begin to shift from fear to authenticity? Not by waiting for a grand moment of courage, but by practicing small acts of honesty in daily life. When you feel afraid to say what you think, choose a gentler but honest version instead of silence. When you're tempted to hide your desires, express a small part of them. When you feel pressure to conform, pause and ask, what would I choose if fear weren't speaking right now? These small acts build momentum. Each one raises your frequency, weakens the program, and strengthens the voice of your authentic self. The risk of awakening. Let's be honest, awakening has a cost. It means losing the comfort of certainty. It means some relationships may no longer fit. It means being misunderstood. But the alternative has a cost too. To stay asleep is to waste your life playing a role you never auditioned for. To die without ever truly living. Which cost is greater? The pain of shedding illusions or the pain of never tasting freedom? A hidden kind of courage. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as refusing to laugh at a cruel joke. Sometimes it's as subtle as saying no when everything in you wants to say yes to avoid conflict. Sometimes it's sitting in silence instead of filling space with lies. Every act of authentic courage is like striking a note that reverberates through the collective field. Others feel it, even if they can't explain why. This is how change spreads, not by force, but by frequency. The gift of responsibility. Many people resist awakening because they confuse responsibility with obedience. They think responsibility means living up to others' expectations, fulfilling roles, paying debts. But true responsibility is something else. True responsibility means owning your freedom. It means recognizing that every choice you make, whether out of fear or authenticity, ripples outward. It means no longer blaming society, family, or authority for your chains, but realizing you tighten them yourself. And if you tighten them, you can also loosen them. The system of control is subtle, but its weakness is even subtler. It only works if you consent. Fear can disguise itself as duty, politeness, or love, but once you see the disguise, its power collapses. You don't need to fight the system. You don't need to topple governments or dismantle institutions. The prison dissolves the moment you stop guarding it. So, I leave you with this question. What mask of fear are you still mistaking for virtue? And what would happen if you took it off today? The ripple of awakening. One awakened person can change an entire room. You've probably felt it before. Someone walks in, and without saying much, the atmosphere shifts. It isn't about charisma or status, it's frequency. Their presence carries something unshakable, something alive. This is why the system fears authenticity more than rebellion. Rebellion still plays within the same rules: fight, resist, obey in reverse. Authenticity ignores the game altogether. It demonstrates that freedom is possible here and now without permission. Why society pushes back. When you begin to live authentically, expect resistance. Family may call you selfish. Friends may say you're unrealistic. Institutions may label you irresponsible. At first, this can feel crushing. Why doesn't anyone celebrate my freedom? But step back and see what's really happening. Your authenticity threatens the invisible agreements that keep the system intact. If you can live freely, what excuse do others have for not doing the same? Rather than face their own fear, they project it onto you. This is why those who expose hidden truths are so often ridiculed. When a whistleblower reveals corruption, the focus shifts from the crime to the character of the whistleblower. When a spiritual teacher speaks about inner freedom, the system calls them dangerous, delusional, or naive. The labels are antibodies of the matrix, designed to neutralize the threat without addressing the substance. And yet, notice something remarkable. If these truths were irrelevant, they would be ignored. The intensity of the resistance is proof of their power. The illusion of safety. Most people cling to conformity because they believe safety lies in numbers. If everyone is doing the same thing, it must be right. But history shows otherwise. Entire societies have marched into disaster together. Wars, collapses, persecutions, all because conformity felt safer than questioning. True safety doesn't come from numbers. It comes from alignment with your own truth. Paradoxically, the very risk of being authentic often reveals itself to be the only real security. Because while the conformist lives at the mercy of shifting systems, the authentic person stands rooted in something unshakable, themselves. The ripple effect. Every act of authenticity sends ripples into the collective. When you refuse to live by fear, you give silent permission for others to do the same. When you choose honesty over approval, you inspire courage in someone watching quietly. This isn't wishful thinking. Social psychology shows how behaviors spread through networks. If one person in a group changes a habit, the effect extends to friends of friends they may never even meet. The field of consciousness works the same way. Your vibration isn't contained within your skin. It interacts, influences, and shapes the environment around you. You don't need to save the world. You just need to live in truth. The ripple takes care of the rest. The trap of false awakenings. But there's a danger here. Some people glimpse awakening, then turn it into another game of status. They become spiritual celebrities, selling prosperity courses, preaching freedom while chasing the same recognition and wealth as before. This isn't awakening, it's redecorating the prison. Changing the wallpaper without touching the walls. True awakening doesn't make you special. It makes you ordinary in the most extraordinary way. It strips away pretenses and returns you to simplicity. Eating when hungry, resting when tired, loving without condition, creating without fear. The practice that dissolves programming. So, how do we return to this state in daily life? The answer is so simple it's easy to dismiss. Silence. Call it meditation, zazen, contemplation, prayer. The names differ, the essence is the same. When you sit quietly and allow the programmed noise of the mind to settle, something deeper emerges. Not something new, but what was always there. Every moment of conscious silence weakens the program. Every time you watch your thoughts without identifying with them, you create space between you and the conditioning. Every instant of still presence reconnects you with your infinite nature. This is why silence is both the simplest and most radical act. No government can control it. No institution can regulate it. You don't need a guru, a course, or initiation. You just need to stop, breathe, and observe. Living from the center. Awakening isn't about leaving society, shaving your head, or moving to the mountains. It's about living in the same world but from a different center. When fear speaks, you listen but don't obey. When authority demands, you discern before complying. When society pressures, You return to your inner compass. This shift changes everything. You may still work, love, build, create, but now it flows from authenticity, not programming. And the quality of your life transforms. The cost of sleep. If you hesitate, ask yourself, what is the cost of staying asleep? Another 30 years in a job that drains you? Another lifetime chasing approval that never satisfies? Another cycle of anxiety, depression, emptiness? All because you obeyed rules you never questioned? The truth is, pretending costs more than awakening ever will. And the longer you wait, the heavier the price. You don't need to change the entire system. You don't need to wake everyone up. That's not your role. Your role is simple. Stop pretending you're less than you are. Live authentically, here and now. Yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, you will lose some things. But what you gain cannot be compared. You gain yourself. And in gaining yourself, you give others the courage to seek themselves too. The prison was never real. The bars were made of belief, the guards made of fear, the walls built of conformity. The key has always been in your hands, hidden in plain sight: awareness. Awakening is not a future event. It is a present choice. Each breath, each thought, each act can either reinforce the prison or dissolve it, and the choice is yours alone. So, I leave you with one final question. If you already are infinite consciousness, pretending to be small, what would your life look like if you stopped pretending today?